Alrighty, let's see real quick. Alrighty, we are in business. Is that where it needs to be? Maybe I'll clean that off real quick. Now it's got to blow dry. Ooh, there we go. Ha! It actually cleaned up okay. Whew. See if anybody wants to jump on here before I start babbling incessantly, because that's what I do. I babble. What are we on? 75. Oh. I am just across the border in Kentucky, northbound on Interstate 75. I'm doing a run from northern Georgia to Lansing, Michigan. This is an overnight run. And they're gone. Hold on a sec. I'll come back. I got nobody. I was told my new phone here has a better picture, and I think that's kind of cool. Two minutes. I got one. Woohoo! All right, I am in Kentucky, northbound on Interstate 75, just across the border. Got a load going from the town of Corner, which is in northern Georgia, going to Lansing, Michigan. And this load was a preload from Friday for pickup today at noon. And 99 times out of 100, when you show up early, especially for an expedite, they have it ready. Well, I showed up at 10 o'clock today and they didn't have it ready. As a matter of fact, it's a little hole in the wall business. They have a buzzer. You go around the back of the loading docks and it says shipping received. You're going to hit the buzzer and it's like a doorbell at a house, and nobody answered. And there was another guy pulled up. Where are you going? I am going from a little non-town outside of Atlanta to Lansing, Michigan, direct. I think they showed this to me as I put it together. It's the little tail you put on the back of the fancy Cadillacs, like the bumper-mounted tail. It doesn't stand up. They're carbon fiber, real fancy. They were actually manufacturing them. That's why there was a huge delay. So it was supposed to be a Sunday pickup, which is unusual. And I got in there at 10, and I rang the doorbell. And when you do the bell to get in the building, it usually sounds like a buzzer, like, you know, at a basketball game. But this was like a car, like at your house. Ding dong. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Hi, whatever. And nobody answered. I could hear people moving around in there, but nobody answered. I'm like, so I waited. I rang the bell again, nothing. And another guy pulls up in a van, and he's looking at me, and he called his people. And what do you do? You know, there's no one answering the door, but there's people in there. So finally, the roll door opened, and they loaded him up. So I got there at 10. My pickup was at 12, and they loaded me at 1. It's very lightweight. Big box didn't weigh anything, and I got rolling. So I am currently in Kentucky, northbound on Interstate 75. And it's been windy all day. On Friday, when I dropped my load in the Atlanta area, and Atlanta is not exactly a mecca of cargo, I was number 8 on the list, which tells me I'm not going anywhere. If I was number 2, I would have been concerned, but I was number 8. Well, the wheel bearings on my van were kind of falling apart, and if you go back on some of my other videos in the last few days, you can actually hear it. Whoa, this guy's going slow. You could actually hear the wheels in the front. It's like really loud road noise. That wasn't the road, that was the bearings. Because this van right now has 193, whoa, 1 mile away from 194,000 miles on it. And I thought my tires were getting loud because I replaced the tires and the road noise didn't go away. And I went, huh. And when I was home this time, oh for joy, got to replace the transmission. Because the transmission, the pump gave out, which killed the torque converter, which wasn't worth fixing, so it has a new transmission. And they said that noise could be your transmission failing. Well, the transmission's replaced, the tires replaced, still making the noise. So I took it to that shop. I just looked up a local shop and I took it in, and they could get me in and they replaced it, and that cost me a breath under $1,600 to add to the how much did I spend? I spent $7,000 on the van, so I'm almost $9,000 into maintenance. Jeez. So anyway, that gave me something to do on Friday, and then I just kind of hung around Saturday. So I got this load, and I'm going north, and I'm going through the rolling hills of Georgia into Tennessee, and I had a little almost mishap on the way. And I'm 57 years old, and I have not caused a car accident ever. But woo, did I get close to having one today. Going through the rolling hills, because it was like cross country to the interstate. And followed a guy. I'm going, right now the speed limit's 70, and I'm going 62. I mean, I don't speed or anything. And I went to get on the highway, and the guy in front of me was going slower than me. And I'm like, all right. So got up there, and I look in the mirror, and the sun was setting, and the sun is putting a steep shadow on the road, and there was a line of trees. So it's the shadow of a tree, and then the gray asphalt road and the trees, and they were like, just flashing by, as fast as you can go. And it was black and gray, and I signal, I start to move, I start to change lanes, I look again, and there's a car next to me that's black and gray, and I jerked the steering wheel. I didn't quite hit the dotted line, but I came back, and the guy blew his horn. I looked down, it's a highway patrol. Good times. So my almost accident was crashing into a highway patrol. And I figured, oh great, this guy's going to pull me over and beat me with a rubber noodle. He didn't. He just honked his horn and kept on going. I went, oh, okay, that's better. So that was, if you're going to go, you got to go stupid, go big. Get it all out of your system, kind of. That was, okay, wake up. But his car blended in with that flashing black and gray stripes just perfectly. That was rather stunning. And I had just cleaned my mirrors, so my mirrors were clean. Still didn't see him. When I left down there in Georgia, it was 66 degrees. And I'm looking down at the dash, and it's currently 28 degrees as we cruise through Kentucky. And I don't know what it's going to be up in Michigan, but I'm going to go on a limb and say it's not going to be higher. That's just me talking. So we're boogieing along here, and a topic that I have never gone over are movies. And the reason this came into my mind is when you have a YouTube channel, you get something called YouTube Studio, and it gives you a running total on how many people are in here, and how many men, how many women, and how people identify what they put in their little thing. And it tells you the age bracket. And the age bracket most common on my page is 45 years old and up. And probably my biggest audience is 65 and above. So when I start babbling about something in here, I sometimes over-explain it because it happened 30, 40 years ago, and I'm thinking no one's old enough to remember that. Well, the fact is most of the people that are on here do remember it because they're my age and older, which is kind of cool. And I wanted to talk about movies because I like to recommend movies for my parents. They're not overly technical into things like that. And there's, at different ages, you look for different things in theaters. And I'm a big-time World War II buff. I love my World War II history. I love my World War II veterans. I love documentaries. I'm really into that stuff, that era. And back in 1987, a movie came out, and I watched it back then, and it didn't really click with me. It was like I saw it, and I went, and I moved on. And then here, a year ago, I caught it again, and I absolutely loved it. And it was a film called Radio Days with a Z. And it's just about a family, an extended family, a group of people in New Jersey in the opening stages of World War II. And if you're my age or above, I highly, highly, highly recommend the movie Radio Days, D-A-Y-Z. It's kind of narrated. I think the voiceover is Woody Allen, I believe. But if you watch how the families interact with each other and how they hang out together, reminds me of what it was like when I was a kid, this kid's age, back in the 70s. How everybody was up in everybody's business. Whoa, sorry, noisemaker. Everybody was up in everybody's business and everybody's in each other's lives. And that's how it was when I was a kid. Well, today, people aren't like that. Everybody kind of sticks to themselves. People play on their phones. I live in a townhouse complex, and there's a couple of neighbors I talk to in everybody's house. No one's ever come by. That's just not how people are. But back then, everybody was up in everybody else's business, and I really appreciated that. So if you're older, if you've got some miles on you like me, the movie Radio Days would be the first one. And there is another film that just recently came out, which is based on a true story, called Jerry and Marge Go Large. And it's about a couple in Michigan here in the early 2000s, a retired couple who found a mathematical flaw in the Michigan lottery and how they were able to make a whole bunch of money off it legally by buying lottery tickets. They made a whole bunch of money. It's a really fun movie, and I also recommended that one to my parents, and they watched it, and then it was just like last week, and then they immediately turned around and watched it again because it's that much fun. It's a movie an older people that are middle age on up will appreciate, along with Radio Days. So if you're looking for a film or some random thing to watch, I'm gonna throw that one out there. So I spent last night at a Pilot in Georgia. When I pull into a truck stop to spend the night, the big trucks have their area, and the cars and the vans, we're up front. We have our own little spot to hang out in. Some places, most, let's say Pilot, Flying J, TA, Loves, if you look, there's a sign. It'll always say customer parking only and or no more than 2 hours. Now, people say, well, how do you spend the night there? Simple. There really isn't anybody working inside any of those places that have the gumption to come outside and tell you to leave. They don't care. But that sign is there for the occasional person that rolls in there with a raggedy car or a vehicle, and they park in the parking lot and they never leave. And I've seen these people. They kind of move in. This is like their new home away from home, and they'll be there for days or weeks. That's what that sign is for. So when those people start living there, they'll tell them, okay, you can't live in our parking lot. But if you're just in a Sprinter van, so if you're doing this kind of work, you're okay to stay there. And if you don't think it's safe, I've actually gone in and asked. And there was one small Pilot I stayed at in New Jersey, and it was a small parking lot. And I asked the guy, hey, I gotta pick up down the street here in like 4 hours. Is it okay if I hide out? Because it said 15-minute parking. And he's like, yeah, you're cool. So I stayed there, just letting him know. But it doesn't hurt to ask sometimes. But I stayed in this parking lot, and when you pull into some of them, you want to find the right place to park. And some, I describe it as it's the wrong setup. It's just, there's not a place to kind of be out of the way, or it's too lit up, or it's too busy of an area. You want what I call the right setup, and that's something you'll learn in time as you look at these truck stops. So I use Pilot Flying J because I have the app, and I get a 10-cent per gallon discount because I'm a veteran. It's part of my app, and I get 10% off everything I buy because of the app, because of my veteran status. So I like using that. But I went to one, and I got in the parking lot, I looked around, I went, and then I went to one that was a little closer, and it had a good setup. So it's empty parking lot. I drive around the back. Don't park up front, ever. I park around the back, and I got up this morning, and there's one other car in the parking lot, and I'll be damned if that guy's not squished up against my driver's door. Like, really, dude? Got this whole parking lot? all the way. You can see over there, and you got to squeeze up right next to my vehicle so I can't open my door. He was in a little car. Frustrating. So I went and picked up my load. Stood there talking to those guys. Like I said, I've got the covers, the back little tail piece for some high-end Cadillac car. Got a couple boxes of them back here. My load is due at 6:30 in the morning. It says I'm going to be there at 2:30 in the morning. And the thing about these big car manufacturers, they're open 24 hours a day. So shipping and receiving. And I always say, if it's due at 7, don't get there at 7. Get there as soon as you can. Get it out of your vehicle, put it in the done category, and then go to sleep. But I'm going to Lansing, so I'm going past Detroit. And I don't know what's going on up there, but there is a pilot up there I'm going to go hide at. So I'm looking for, I'll probably be tired by then. If you look at the screen right now, you'll notice there's not a lot of cars on the road, which is kind of nice. Because the last few times I went up and down this highway, it seemed like there was a wall of traffic. And today is a Sunday, so I'm not dealing with the normal 24-hour day rush hour they have in some of these cities. So this is helping in making the drive a little more enjoyable. I was talking to my mother here a little while ago. She was on the phone with her for 2 hours and 8 minutes. It's a new record. We were talking about movies. That's why I came on here to mention. So the two movies, if you're a little older, I want you to try are Radio Days with a Z and Jerry and Marge Go Large. Those are two movies I think you'd really enjoy, because my parents really enjoyed both of them. I recognize some of the names on this screen, but hi to everybody. This is Interstate 75. I'm going straight north in Kentucky. There's not a whole lot going on out here, which is my... where am I? Registry track. Yes. Northbound Interstate 75 in Kentucky, and I don't even know what town I'm near, but I just crossed the border about 20 minutes ago. So I'm still in the middle of Nowhereville. Gas prices continue to creep down, which is a good thing. And it's a little higher down south. I just went by a station here a minute ago. It was $2.29 a gallon. Currently en route to Lansing, Michigan. So I got to blow by Detroit and turn west, a little west-northwest of Detroit to Lansing, to a Cadillac plant. This company I just picked up from makes carbon fiber components. They also make stuff for the Apache helicopter. The guy was telling me about, which I thought was kind of cool. Some kind of panel for that. But this place is running weekends, and there was myself and one other van there for some other company, and they're literally making the products and loading vans and sending them out the door because of the demand for whatever they sell. Or doesn't even see the channel. Some people don't go by that. Don't go that far back. But other than trying not to crash into a highway patrol today, it's been kind of uneventful. The lowering of gas prices has helped noticeably, I gotta say. The van's a lot quieter. I haven't had the chance to really work on my gas mileage because one of the side non-benefits of bad wheel bearings is it affects your gas mileage because the vehicle doesn't roll as clean. Gas mileage is affected by your air filter, tire pressure, how fast you're going, headwinds and whatnot, but also your wheel bearings. It's more friction, and they were getting loud, not destroyed loud, but wearing out. Whoa. Don't crash. Yeah, that's a good safety idea. Don't crash. Yeah, that would have been bad. Hitting a highway patrol. I've been playing around with music in here, and I have posted a couple of videos where I film for maybe 15 minutes, and I play music, what's called royalty-free music, so you can play it without copyright problems, even though on my page it says copyright, but that's if somebody that owns that song contacts and says, oh, you can't do that, then they'll make a note and I have to bring it down. But I'm literally playing music that's non-royalty. It's free to use music. so that's not really an issue. And what I wanted to do was live stream and play music. The problem is my phone will not play music and live stream at the same time. And there are all kinds of apps and things you can put on here, and none of them work. I know, I tried. So what I'm doing is just recording and playing music. And something else that I've run into is when I'm live streaming and I get into an area that's really cool, like mountainous or twisty roads, or getting down into, tight areas with the bushes, the trees are up against the road, the stream interrupts. And that is maddening when it's like, wow, here's a cool part, boop, gone, and it's just there and says, nope. And then by the time it comes back, people have left, or it just says, you're gone, you can't come back, and that's just frustrating. So sometimes I can live stream, and sometimes I just got to record what's there, and then I post it, because I think it looks cool, if you're looking for countryside. And I've had a handful of people come on here. Sometimes they tell me where they're from. I had a guy from Turkey, a guy from Ethiopia on here, and he just likes to see what the terrain looks like. It's a foreign country. You're seeing something different. I was up in Minnesota, had a guy get excited by looking at what the countryside looked like in the trees and the fog, and just they like seeing stuff like, which I get it. Now this is nighttime, so this is a little different, but given the choice, I'll fly in the dark. I'd fly. I used to do that too. I'll drive in the dark. I prefer nighttime. I like the glow, the cockpit lights. This to me is more relaxing, as long as I'm not falling asleep, which I'm not. I prefer this. I'm checking my batteries here. I'm charging everything up. It's 29 degrees right now, and I don't know how cold it gets up here, but it's probably going to get colder as the night goes on. Okay, there's a flag. You can't see it, but off to the left there's a flagpole that looks like the wind finally laid down, which helps. But I have this new non-Ford transmission in my van right now. The guy said I can fix what's broken, which is the torque converter and the pump, but it'll be $4,500 and you'll have a second-hand transmission. Or I could put a Ford transmission in there, which is junk, which will cost you $8,000 turnkey. Or I can order it from a friend of mine who builds transmissions correctly for $6,000. I said, give me that one. And it's got some new hybrid super thin oil that has to be drained and filled every 30,000 miles, which is every 3 months, for this job. And you can actually get the filter out without taking the van apart. There's actually a door for it, a little compartment. So I'm gonna have this guy keep an eye on this transmission. It doesn't really feel any different, but most people neglect their transmissions, so you buy an older used car, you got to deal with whatever they've done. This one will be taken care of properly, just like my engine and my oil changes. Which, let me check my oil, by the way. I am at 53%. There's a little onboard computer that tells you, and I keep an oil change on board. And I know I've hyped this in the past, but Upside and Fetch are the two apps I use on the road a lot. And Upside money builds up in here, and when I get $20 of credits, I send it to Amazon, and then from Amazon I buy the oil that I use, and I use Castor Oil Edge, which is the top tier synthetic, and I use this runs on 520, and I get the oil for free with my Upside and or Fetch, which is the receipt thing. Please don't drive while live streaming, not safe. Why? The camera's doing all the work and sitting in the mount. I'm just talking. I'm just showing people what's to be seen out here. It's not much to see in the dark, but at some point we're going to drive through some towns. You're going to see some lights and stuff, which can be interesting. There's some truck drivers that do this, and they have a higher view than me, than what I have on the road. But between Fetch, and Fetch is an app you use for receipts. You take photographs of receipts, you mine yours, the ones you find laying on the ground, and you get points for them. You take the points. Tried meditation, so you can share yours. Meditation? Have you tried meditation? No. I don't even know exactly what that would entail. One of the advantages of this type of work, expediting, I don't want to say it's brainless, but it's quasi-brainless when you're driving, because your body kind of drives on autopilot, and it lets your mind wander, and I really like that. You have free time to go over things. I'm 57 years old, and I can look back on my life, and just some random event that happens pops into my head, and then it gives me a fun memory. And sometimes I talk about it on here. You know, it's just random little things that happen, and some person, a statement, a smell, a sound, or something will cue it, and you'll go, I remember, you know, and you start thinking about it, and I enjoy doing that. And I'm one of those guys that when you say 30 years ago, my brain goes, 1970. That's how my brain, you know, how that works. There's only objective. Yeah, this is kind of a stress feed. You get tired doing this, and it can get annoying when you're waiting around, but generally speaking, this is a stress-free job. My last flying job I was doing, what about getting dinner with mom and dad? Oh, those are my favorite movies. Yep, my mother and my stepfather live local, and I go hang out with them as much as possible. Before I turned this on, I was on the phone with my mother for 2 hours and 8 minutes talking to her. She's 80. She's a Spitfire. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can still take her in a fist fight 2 out of 3 times, but she's quick. And I was BSing with her for over 2 hours. And, there's little catchphrases, there's little statements that her and I can have a conversation, just say a word or a phrase that only her and I will understand. There was a radio show that came out in the early 70s, and it ran till about, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. It was called Prairie Home Companion. And it was a Saturday night radio show out of Minneapolis. And in the early 80s, we used to literally lay on the floor in the living room. It was 2 hours or 3 hours, I don't remember which, and listen to it. And they made a lot of, there was like little skits they would talk about, and one of the things in there, they talk about a Norwegian. They talk about, I guess there's a lot of people from Norway that live in Minnesota, I don't really know, but they were talking about the famous Norwegian daredevil, and his name was Eagle Knutsen. And Eagle Knutsen was known for jumping a rototiller over nickel barrels. And just some random thing like that, and once in a while, my mother will just say something about Eagle Knutsen. People look at you. No, I did not. I flew the AH-1 Cobra, the F model, the last model of the Cobra helicopter. And ironically, I went through flight school in 1989 and 1990, and I was one of the last classes that took the Cobra. The aircraft got pushed to National Guard service out of the regular Army, or I call it the real Army, and then it got pushed out of the National Guard. They retired them, but they were flying them overseas, to, third world countries, and some of our friends had them, and they don't even service those anymore. So apparently they're gone. And if you're looking up the job title, anybody who's military, you have your MOS, your job in the military is called a military occupational specialty. 19 Bravo in the Army is infantry. 19 Kilo is tanker, which I used to be when I was first joined. Mine was, my MOS was 152 Golf, letter G. 152 Golf was Cobra, 152 Fox, or F, was the Apache drivers. And I was a Golf, the Cobra. And right about the time they were talking about getting rid of the Cobra was the exact same time the Air Force talked about retiring the A-10. Warthog, the ground strike aircraft. So the Army said, we'll take them. And they said, yeah, and if that happens, maybe we'll take the Cobra pilots and slip them over into the A-10. I was like, oh, that was a pipe fantasy. And they said, no, we're keeping it. I'm flying Chinooks right now. IL crew chief. Oh, right on. They say, you guys, the Chinook is 2 palm trees fornicating in a dumpster. Which is, they say, two engines and 5 transmissions trying to have a mid-air collision with itself. And the one thing about the Chinook that cracked me up is it could completely outrun us. In a Cobra, Chinook could blow our doors off. And I believe it's a 3-man crew, and it's designed to carry 44 people. And if you look in the Guinness Book of World Records, they put 105 people in a Chinook in the Falklands War. The Brits loaded out all their eggs in one basket, and a Chinook took off a cargo ship, and one of those Exocet missiles came in moments later and hit the cargo ship and sank it. And they lost all their spare parts. Every Chinook on board and all the spare parts went with it, so they only had the one aircraft with no spares, and they ran it 24 hours a day and were able to get to do some basic services on it. At one point, they thought it was going in the drink, and I guess one of the emergency procedures when you're going in the water is you jettison the doors. So the pilot and co-pilot popped the doors off, pulled the handles, a little emergency release, and they dropped them, and then they were able to recover, and they didn't end up crashing, and they spent the rest of the war in that freezing environment flying around with no doors. With no spare parts, and the aircraft didn't break down, but they jammed 105 people in there because that was the only heavy lift helicopter they had. Fastest in the air. Oh yeah, was it something? Don't those things cruise at like 160 or something? A Cobra, generally speaking, it seems like we could do a $135, but if you pulled on it really hard, it would do like 165, but you were pulling on it. Probably a lot during my training. Oh yeah, you get with one of those guys. I flew until last year. I retired with 16,900 hours total flight experience when I stopped flying the tail end of 24. My medical, I was flying medical helicopter, and I went for my class 1, and they look at your EKG, and your EKG goes da 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 da. Well, mine went da 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 doop da 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 da. They said, "Oh, you can't fly anymore." And I was like, "Oh, gee, thanks." So. But I look at it and say, I did 35 years and I'm still alive, so I'm happy. Because trying to go to I know how old are you, first of all, if you're going to warrant officer? Have you already applied? I mean, what's your situation? Because I just talked to a guy 3 days ago. We were just, because I have a sticker on the back that's got a Cobra, and the guy started asking me about warrant officer. He's going in like the next 20. Okay, you're at the right age. You're in a good spot. All right. Have you already applied, or are you getting ready to apply? Haven't even made a packet. Okay, the packet is the hard part. Are you regular Army or Guard or Reserve, or what's your situation? I mean, I don't know what your connection is to the military at this point. Real Army, weekend warrior, okay, perfect. All right, here's where you call in all your contacts. You need to have your packet you got to go take, not the ASVAB, what's it called? That was the first one. Then there was the flight school one. ASVAB, Armed Services Vocation. No, there's another one. You have to take a test. And it's a written test, a time test, and it's basically, do you understand angles? Like pulleys, like this wheel turns this way, which one? I remember taking it, but I can't. The FAST test. That's it. I think it was called the FAST, F-A-S-T, Flight Aptitude Safety, something. FAST test. This is going way back. But yeah, you need to go take those tests. This may have changed. I don't know. When I was in, and this is all different now, excuse me, when you joined the military originally, you had a GT score. And it's different now, but when I was in, the minimum score you had to have to get in the Army back then was a 70. So if you were a 70 to a 90, you were kind of a bonehead, and it limited what you could do. And then 90 to 100, a lot more things were open to you. 100 to 110, you were pretty much qualified for whatever you wanted to do. And it seems like 110 and above, it was pretty much a free-for-all. You could do whatever. You were open to all fields. And you have to be in the top categories. But I don't know. It seems like a couple of years ago I was talking to somebody about that, and the scoring system today is completely different from when I did it. But you need to be in the top category to even qualify to apply for it. But I don't know what your scores were, and I don't know how they do it now. But you might want to find some GT 110 for what? Yeah, so it's the same score. Are you a 110 or above? Yes, I'm in America, and we are northbound on Interstate 75 in, don't tell me, Kentucky right now. GT at 110 or above. Are you 110 or above, by the way? Because I'm tooting my horn. It's a very, when I took the ASFAB 110, oh, perfect, you just made it. When I took the ASFAB, I had just studied all this stuff they asked on the test. And I'm an idiot, don't get me wrong, I'm a freaking moron, but I ended up getting a 124, which to this day stuns me. Can't believe this is the actually live stuff. Internets go crazy these. Oh yeah. Yeah, and now with all AI where they make pictures of dogs dancing and talking to you, yeah, it's freaking awesome what you can do. But yes, okay, so you got, that's the first thing. You need to take a class 1 flight physical. If you can't pass the flight physical, you're not gonna go. So make sure you've got that, and you have to pass the vision test. Now there are people that fake it till you make it. Oh, jeez, this guy's trying to, there's nowhere to pass, dude. Fake it till you make it. Now there are people that fake their flight physicals. But one of the first things that happens when you get to warrant officer school for pilots is they make you go take another flight physical. So if you've kind of BS, and we had guys that did it, you're not going to make it. You have to have uncorrected 20/20 vision. You have to, you can't wear glasses. Class 1, much difference from a class 2. EKG. You got to take an EKG, which is pretty easy. But you can't, you got to have at least 20/20 uncorrected vision. And that is in effect until the first time you touch the controls in an aircraft. I'm in a class full of dudes. We're going through the written tests. We're going to classes. We go through training. We get in, we fire up the engine, and we fly an aircraft for the very first time. We go back into class, and half the dudes are wearing glasses. Is there much difference between a class 1 and a class 3? Yeah, there's a huge difference from a class 1 to class 3. You need to go take the test. If you can't get a class 1, you're wasting your time at this point to get into flight school. It is which is the time where, wait a second, what's the time? Right now, hold on a second. I don't think I've changed time zone. I got to flip the light on here. It is 10 minutes to 8 locally right now. Class 1 is wait. Class 3 is can you breathe? Class 2 is can you breathe and can you see me? Class 1 is, like I said, you get an EKG and whatnot. Let me ask you something. Yeah, it's 8 o'clock at night here. For the flying thing, how tall are you? That's also something to take into consideration. What is your dimensions? Yeah, we're driving northbound at night. I am driving from Georgia to, where am I going? Lansing, Michigan. This is an all-nighter right now. We're just cruising. Yeah, you're probably, if you're 21 years old, you're probably skinny, but how tall are you? That's the question. So first things first, you got to take the fast test. Only 4 foot, wait a minute, I'm only 4, whoa. 4'10", 5'10", that's better, okay, you're good. My problem is, and again, I found this out in advance. Thanks for hauling, yeah. I'm 6'4", and all my height is in my upper body, which is awkward. You're seriously 4'10". You might want to look into that. I don't know if that's, they might cut you off. They might, well, here's a side note. When I was stationed in Fort Carson, Colorado, we were sitting around doing nothing, and we were flipping through some Army manuals, and I found a page that said the Army Astronaut Program. And I went, the Army. Oh, seriously. And I read the requirements, and here's the weirdest thing. I met the requirements to apply for it. And I went, okay. I don't know about the height. So I filled out, this is old days. I photocopied the page, I filled out the application, I mailed it in, I forgot about it. And about a month later, I get a note from NASA that says, we want to interview you for the astronaut program. Now, like I said, I'm an idiot, right? And I'm like, oh, this ain't going to go anywhere. Well, where I'm south side of Colorado Springs, I drive up to the Air Force Academy, I drive in the gate, and I go, I said, where? I got to go see NASA. They go, oh, yeah, drive up here to building, blah, blah, blah. And I walk in the room, and I said, I got this note for an interview. And she goes, oh, yes, what your name is? Wheeler Air Force Base right now. Okay. And this guy goes, she says my name to a guy in the room behind her, and he comes walking out with his file, and he says, okay. He looks at me, and he stops, and he says, how tall are you? I said, 6'4". He goes, you're out. Huh? And he goes, they call them spacesuits, pressure suits. They only make pressure suits between 5 and 5'8". I went, oh, oops. Now, we had a pilot in our class. You say you're 4'10". I don't know if there's a minute. He was 5 feet, maybe 4'11". He was pretty short. Kerfoot was his last name. Yeah, he hated me for some reason. Anyway, you might want to check, do some search and do some research online. Find out if you're tall enough, because I don't know. I mean, that makes it easy for you to fit in all these aircraft, because I didn't, because my height and my sitting height, I was technically too tall to be a pilot. So the guy that gave me my exam, my Class 1 physical on the way, he literally told me to squatch down, to kind of slide my butt forward in the seat to make sure I wasn't too tall, because I was too tall. But find out what the height thing is, but you got to pass the Class 1 physical. If you can't pass the physical, don't waste your time. They won't let you in. Later on, you go to Class 2. But to get in, you got to have Class 1. And after 6 months, a Class 1 turns into a Class 2 anyway, so such is life. But if you've got the GT score, you got that covered. You got to pass a Class 1. You cannot have uncorrected vision. You have to have at least 20/20. That's, if you got to get those half of the base requirements. If you don't have that, the rest of it's a waste of time. And then to put the packet together, and I don't know if this has changed, but back in the day, you had to have a recommendation written by a field grade officer or above, which in Army speak is a major. Lancaster, oh, right on. And how those are written is you basically, with AI now, it's probably really simple. You basically write it and they sign. You put their name on, they sign it. But you got to use did he oil in the truck? Well, yeah. When you a field grade, again, in the Army, it's the major above. You have to write a recommendation. Oh, this is a fantastic soldier or airman, and this is a wonderful asset, and I think this is blah 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 blah. Basically, you write it, and they sign it because they're not going to write it. So you got to get one. I believe it was from 1 or 2. And I may have cheated a little bit. I ended up getting a suck-ass job up at Division, and I drove for the Division Sergeant Major, and I wrote a recommendation and put a name on it, and during a CALFEX, which is a Combined Arms Live Fire exercise, and I got it signed by the Undersecretary of Defense. That's right. Let's see, how do you start fire? I'm a non-rated crew member right now. Okay, like I said, make sure you got Class 1. Make sure you can pass the eye exam. Go take the FAST test, which you have to, it's like a pass-fail thing. And do some research and see if your height is going to be an issue, which I don't know if it is. I honestly don't know if they had a height, but that's on the shorter side. So, but I remember that guy Kerfoot, I think he was 5 feet tall. But anyway, most aircraft are actually designed for smaller pilots, smaller people. They don't really make aircraft or cars or clothes for guys my size. But you got to get the eye exam, the 110, 5'10". I thought you said you were 4'10". Oh, you're... Sir. All right. All right, yeah, you could pass the flight. If you got the 110 GT score, go pass the flight physical, make sure you got the eyeballs. From there, it's all downhill. And then you submit a packet, and they only have so many slots available, and the classes start every 2 weeks. The other person, yeah. And if you keep copies of everything, if you submit a packet and you don't get picked up, send it in again. And it doesn't get picked up, send it in again. I know people that put in their packet a half a dozen times. There's an opening because there's only so many. I think we had 42 guys in our class. Sir, what a solution for me. What's it say? Or tilt rotor. Yeah, that stuff all came along after I was out. They didn't have that technology. I got Bill Clinton out of the Army. He showed up, and the military got cut to pieces. We got slaughtered. People started getting pitched to the curb. It was kind of sad. I would have retired in 2006. That would have been awesome. Yeah, the tilt rotor. They were just messing with those, the Ospreys. Yeah, that tilt rotor thing. That's some neat technology. You fly around. I don't. Did they ever let you fly? Have you ever experienced it? Oh, right now I am en route from northern Georgia, some little town that doesn't appear on a map, and I'm going to Lansing, Michigan. This is a direct shot. This says right now it's claiming I'll be there. Let's see. It says I'll be there at 2:40 in the morning, which I still got to stop and get gas and go on a potty run. Yeah, the traffic is light. This is nice because the last few times I've been up and down through here, the traffic is terrible. I mean, like bumper to bumper, and it's annoying. It's nice. I like driving at night. I prefer to drive at night. I also prefer to fly at night. Drink coffee is good on the situation. Yeah, I'm not a coffee guy. I'm not supposed to, but I partake occasionally in the Celsius energy drinks, kind of a mild energy drink. And due to medical situations, I may start getting away from those completely. But I sleep when I can, and I drive when I can. And a lot of people don't realize this, but you get tired from dehydration. You know, you're driving long distance. You don't want to drink a lot, so you don't have to pee. But water is what keeps you being hydrated, keeps you awake, because up in your brain, somebody explained this to me, when it's up in your brain, you have these little synapses that snap up in there, and when you're dehydrated, they don't snap. And through that lower enlisted life right now. Phone auto caps on. I have no idea how to un-auto cap it. Hey, I was enlisted. I joined in '86. I crewed the M1 tank. And you hear about the M1A1 and the M1A2. I crewed the M1A nothing, the originals. And I went from there in '86, got to my unit in '87, flailed around and played clank on a tank, and then went to flight school in '89. And what absolutely cracked me up is the 105, the L7 gun. My last job as an enlisted guy, I was they called it a Spec 4, now it's called Specialist, or we called it a Full Bird Private. And when I got my orders for flight school, I wasn't promoted to E5 because that's the minimum rank. I was appointed. So I went down to the PX and bought myself some rank and put them on my collar. I just said, okay, I'm an E5 now. And people said, well, you didn't get promoted. I said, I didn't get appointed, I got appointed. So I went to flight school. I was driving for the division sergeant major. I go to flight school. I graduate. I come back a year later, and I walk into his office, and he's still there. And he looked at me, and he said, I'm so glad you're back. The guy they replaced you with is an idiot. And I technically outranked the division sergeant major. That was just funny. And then that guy retired. Non-active auto captures on my keyboard. No. I haven't a clue. Yeah, the 105 cannon. I was in 3rd Battalion, 67th Armored Regiment at Fort Hood. It says, you called any escort today. What does that even mean? You're talking about prostitution or something else? I don't do escort duties out here. I drive my van by myself. My higher-ups are right now. Oh, yeah. And I was in a CAV unit at Fort Carson. I don't think that unit's there anymore. I don't know if it exists. But we had 47 guys in our CAV troop, and there was a first sergeant, and only about half the people were enlisted. And the first sergeant we had, I don't remember his last name, but his first name was Ralph. And when he got mad and he started yelling and screaming, his voice would turn away. His voice would go away. He'd be like spitting air, and he'd be getting mad about something. And I would, here I am, this 21-year-old Woj, which is a warrant officer junior grade. And I'd walk over and put my arm around his shoulders, and I'd shake my finger. I said, "Now, Ralph, you need to calm down." He said, "Well, nobody listens to me." I said, "Yeah, I know. It's just the nature of what we're doing here. I'm really sorry." No, I don't deliver drugs. I deliver auto parts for the most part. Exclusive. So I have exclusive serious. You want to try this tobacco classic? It's nice. No, I'm not a smoker. Yeah, first sergeants have a tendency to be like that. That's kind of their job. Sometimes it's unnecessary. But when I was enlisted, I would notice when some kind of weird, let's call it what it is, shit detail would pop up. It seems like the first sergeant would yell my name, some kind of job that had to be done, and he would always yell my name. And at the time, I thought he was picking on me. Why? What did I do wrong? And as I got older, it dawned on me he was always yelling my name because I would do it right. We went on no, I don't smoke. We went on a reforger exercise, and I don't know if that translates into Air Force speak, but that's return of forces to Germany, where in theory, the Soviets launched an attack and were rolling across Western Europe, and we jumped on planes and flew over to Europe and landed, and they had what's called a KEGI site, which is a combat equipment company, which were these armored warehouses, and they had our tanks over there, new tanks just like ours, full of ammunition, ready to go, jump in them and go, and meanwhile, they're shipping our current ones in the stateside over to replenish, blah, 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 blah. And we got there, and all these tanks are bumper to bumper in this building, and this guy had this tool. It was a wrench that was wooden on one side, wrench on the other, and he said to the first sergeant, and he says, "I need you to have one guy to walk around and connect all the batteries, because they keep the batteries disconnected on a little trickle charger." And as soon as he said that, in this room full of people, he screamed out my name. Again, what did I do wrong? And it dawns on me, he knew I would do the job right. So when your first sergeant's being a butthead, just understand if he's sending you on missions that are, need to be done, he's probably doing it because you'll do it right. And they teach them to act like that towards people, because for some reason, if you start slacking it up on people, they have a tendency to get real lazy. We had a thing when I was enlisted that guys were, the motor pool was over here, and there was this big parking area, and then the barracks were over here, and guys would say they're going to go, there's shamming. Again, that was an Army term. Shamming is goofing off. And guys would say, "I'm going to go watch sham theater." So they would run across the street and hide in their rooms and watch TV or do something stupid. And that's just the nature of the military. People are looking for a shortcut to get out of doing stuff. It's unfortunate. But yeah, first sergeants, what's even worse is that when you have a first sergeant and he leaves and a new one comes in, and the new one doesn't just come in and fall in line. He's got to come in and make a stink. They got to come in and make a bunch of noise and act like jackasses. And I've watched it happen a few times, and it's just weird. They can't just roll in and just do the job. They got to roll in and make a scene and cause problems and annoy people. But what can you do? But like I said, if you're trying to put your packet together, get it together, because I've met people that have been quote unquote putting a packet together for years and never quite get around to it. They cut back then. Again, this is me talking. They cut you off at 29 to go in, unless you're in a National Guard unit. We had guys in their mid-30s going through. And the Guard unit in the town that I live in were trying to send pilots, some of their ground personnel, and they couldn't pass the physical because they didn't have enough pilots. They had Apaches, they got rid of them. Now they have Blackhawks, but none of their ground guys could pass the flight physical. Cutting pilot slots right now, I think. Yeah, they're expensive. Pilots are expensive. When I went in, they had from 1964 until 1988 the first helicopter you flew was called a TA-55, which you probably aren't even familiar with it. It's a Schweitzer 300. It's a piston-powered two-seat POS death trap. And that was the training helicopter until 1988, and I got there in 1989. So those guys would train in that and transition into the Huey. By the time I got there, I climbed into a Huey. We didn't mess with the TA-55s. And every class has a class, like there's a local shop that prints shirts. And again, this is before your time, but there was a song back in the 80s by Sammy Hagar called I Can't Drive 55. And their t-shirt had Sammy Hagar's face on it, and it said, I can't fly 55s. And that was the first class that didn't use those. And there's one of them at the Chow Hall, which you'll see when you get there, that's like a gate guard. It's sitting out front of the Chow Hall. That's the only one I ever saw the whole time I was in. Yeah, flight school was fun. I mean, it's hard. And there were some of the guys, when you start getting into the flying after warrant officer school, and in the warrant officer, this is again back then, I don't know how this has changed, but I would say 2/3 of the people in the warrant officer school are pilots. You're going to have an occasional oddball in there, like one guy was a band leader, going through, getting his warrant and leaving, going back to the marching band or whatever the heck he did. There were a handful of guys that just looked totally unmilitary. And in warrant officer school, you don't have a drill sergeant, you have a TAC officer. TAC stands for Training and Counseling. And he focuses on those non-military guys because what they are basically doctors. These are guys that join the Guard or the reserves. They're real live, honest to God doctors. And they go to basic training, so that's all they have under their belt is experience. And then they put them in warrant officer school for 6 weeks. I can't remember how long it is. And they get them a warrant officer rank, and then they go to their unit and they get commissioned as like majors or something. It's weird. And then they're in the reserve, and the payoff is the Army pays off, $50,000, $100,000 of their student loans. There's some kind of payoff. So you're going to have a handful of guys in there that just, you look at them and it's like that old Sesame Street song, one of these things doesn't belong here, one of these things is just not the same. It's just, they don't look military, and they don't act military, but that's what they're doing there. And being that most of the people around you have prior military time, the TAC officer tries to be a hard ass, and it doesn't work because the rest of us have been in the military too, and we know the game. We know how this works. And there was this one TAC who he thought he was a rough, tough guy, and he had a picture in the office of him and his wife and kids. And he lived on post. And one weekend we went and ran up and down the streets. I don't know how the Air Force does, but on Army base, there's your sign is out in front of your house that says your name and your rank, so everybody knows who's who in the Navy. That's how they do it. Well, we went and ran up and down the streets and found his house. He was gone somewhere that weekend. And we found his wife. He had the picture. And we said, we want to retake this picture. And we told her the plan, and she was on board with it. Her kids dressed in the same outfit. She dressed in the same outfit, except the one tall, goofy-looking doctor guy in our class, he was Kenny. Last name is Kenny. Stood in for him, and they retook the picture, but with him. And then we took it on base, and they blew it up, and we hung it on his wall. And Monday morning, he's in his office, and we're standing out there in the dark, and you hear him yell from inside the building, and he comes out with that picture in his hand. He's looking around in the dark, and he goes, I did the Kenny! He's yelling for him, and the other TAC officers crawled out of the office on their hands and knees laughing, and fell down on the floor laughing, because it was awesome that, the military wives, they're just crazy as military people. So there's some stuff going on, and one of the strangest things that happened in warrant officer school, and you may see this, is we are kind of processing in, and then there's there's people around, we're all talking to each other and whatnot, and then on the first day, we go out in formation, and they shave your head, I don't know why, but they shave your head again, and you're standing there, and your rank is WOC, Warrant Officer Candidate, so you put your rank on. And we're standing out there with our shaved heads, and this is back when they had the green camouflage BDU Army. I don't know what they wear anymore. And there's a guy in the front row with dreadlocks, long dreadlocks, bundled behind his head, a beard that hangs halfway down to his stomach, in uniform, standing there with us. And he's not wearing a name tag. And I mean, talking about a turd in a punch bowl. You just look at this guy, he looks like a homeless dude. We're like, okay, this is a little awkward. And the TAC comes out with a clipboard, and the two TACs look at each other, and they compare notes, and they go, okay, cool, and they start to go march off and do whatever. And we're like, what's with the dude in the freaky hair? His last name was Rude, Rude, and he was a Delta Force guy. And he was going through the warrant officer course to become a team leader. We talked to him later. And this is in 1989. And if you remember, in 1983, the U.S. military invaded Grenada because the Cubans were setting up shop down there. And this guy landed in Grenada 11 days before the invasion. He was the first U.S. military member on the ground. They brought him in by submarine, and he rode up to the beach with his long, that's his disguise was this long freaky hair and the dreadlocks. He's a white guy with dreadlocks. And he was armed with a .22 caliber pistol that was silenced. And basically what he did was remove the rabble-rousers. There were people that were going to be a problem. And he basically took them out. Right before the invasion happened, there's one big radio station down there, and he went to the radio station, took out everybody, and knocked out the transmitter. So there wouldn't be this big uprising or screaming and yelling to keep. But he got rid of all the rabble-rousers. Then he went to a bar, and he sat there and watched the invasion, drinking beer at a bar. To hear him tell the story was kind of fun. And I don't know if you've ever gone to college or gone to a high-stress course, but when you're in the classes, which, again, I don't know how different they are now from when I was there, but it is a very, 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 very fast-paced course. You're sitting in a class, and you're taking a sip out of a fire hose, and they are filling your brain with information, and then you test out, and you walk out of the classroom, and the expression that everybody had was holding your finger up to the side of your head like you're flushing a toilet, and you would flip your finger, meaning get rid of all that information because you got to make room for the next stuff that's coming. I mean, because it was that quick. One of the most memorable things that happened the entire time I was in flight school, and I've actually talked about that on here a couple of times before, is towards the end of flight training, they took us into a classroom. There was a guy that checked our IDs to make sure we were supposed to be there. Brought us into a classroom and locked the door. Opened up a locked case and broke out VHS tapes. Remember those? He broke out these VHS tapes and he put one in the machine, and it was talking about the Stinger missile, which was a brand new thing. This is 40 years ago. It was a brand new missile, and it talked about what it does, what it doesn't do, what its limitations are. They just didn't want this information. It's probably out there now. I'm not allowed to talk about the specifics, but and then they showed videos of it because the first Stinger ever fired was shot by an untrained British soldier in the Falklands, and it actually worked. Didn't even have a clue how to operate it, and he shot down an Argentinian aircraft with it. But in the Afghan war, the Soviet-Afghan war, they supplied them. They made some movies about it, but the part that blew my mind is they had video. What they did was they trained the local yokels how to use them. And went through the whole process and said, shoot this missile, and when the missile goes off, you have the tube. They said, bring us the tube back, we'll give you another one. So they would attach them to a goat or a camel or whatever, go up over the mountains, and taught them how to deploy them. They also taught a crew how to take video footage. So it was a crew. It was a guy with the missile and a guy with a camera. and they would bring back video proof of what they did with it. And when it first started out, they were somebody holding a camera, I don't know who it was, filming two quote-unquote civilians were standing there with a Stinger missile in the case. It comes in an armored case, the case opened up, and they got a stick, and they're pointing at components, they're talking, and there's some local yokels looking at them like it looks like an RPG for all their, they don't know what it is. And there's two civilians, one's talking through a translator, and the other one's got his back turned to the camera. And all of a sudden, you hear people start yelling and running, and everybody's diving for cover, and one of those Mi-24 Soviet helicopters is flying by. And it's in the distance, and everybody's diving for cover, and the camera goes down, the camera comes up, and it turns, and the second civilian has the missile on his shoulder. And you're supposed to super elevate to fire it. The aircraft was more or less parallel to him, and it wasn't that far away. And the second guy pulled the trigger, and the missile fired, and it turned, and on perfect video footage, the missile, for some strange reason, didn't go for the engine. It hit the front of the aircraft, which it's not supposed to, but it hit the cockpit, detonated, and the whole front end of the aircraft disappeared. And the nose pitched up, aircraft pointed straight up in the sky, disappeared from sight, and then it hit the ground. You hear it, but you can't see it, disappears, and then a big fireball and smoke comes up, and the camera's kind of jerking around, and everybody's looking, and the camera goes back, and all these local yokels are trying to grab these missile systems out of the boxes, and the guy with the stick starts beating them to get them off, because you don't know how to use it, you just can't pick it up, play with it like a toy. And as the camera's looking around, the guy that pulled the trigger is sitting next to me in the classroom. Somebody in the back of the room goes, "Hey, Howie, isn't that you?" And the guy stops the film, flips on the lights. I looked at Howie, which is his name. He was a Green Beret, and he's white as a sheet, and he's sitting next to me, looking around, going, And the guy looked at him and went, "Damn." The first missile kill, Stinger missile kill in the Afghan-Soviet war was shot by the guy sitting next to me at the table. That was the biggest shocker I ever had. He was a Green Beret guy going to flight school, because you can go to flight school from anywhere. And I thought that was kind of cool. So you're going to see some weird combinations of people. And it's something about the warrant officer course, which is, boy, they take the word busy work and they push it to a whole new altitude. They will literally tell you when you go there, we are going to give you too much stuff to get done. Literally too much. And you can't get it all done. We want to see what you do under that kind of pressure. And you actually get it all done. You actually fight and kick and claw and you get it done. But there's a lot of busy work. And all you got to do is survive it. It's going to be annoying. Most people survive. There's a couple guys didn't make it. We had a guy in flight school, went past warrant officer, and he went drunk driving. So let me tell you, from an aviation standpoint, you're better off having a murder on your record versus a drunk driving charge as a pilot. And I'm telling you the truth. You're better off being a convicted murderer than being a convicted drunk driver. Highly recommend you stay away from alcohol. You don't need it. You can live without it. I don't drink, never have, not going to start anytime soon. But this guy got caught drunk driving in flight school. So his aviation career ended right there. And even if he wanted to leave and go out on the street, they're going to find that, and that's going to stop you from getting your medical. They're going to run a criminal background for your driving record. I mean, that's part of it. They can't have that kind of... That just happened on the news. A guy from one of the airlines showed up for work drunk. Airline pilot, drunk. Trying to, act like he's not. Dude, it doesn't work like that. Just make it safe. Don't even mess with that stuff. What's more important? Tying one on or your aviation career? And there's people that make the wrong choice. The warrant officer school is... like I said, get your packet, make copies, send it in. If you don't get picked up, send it in again. It's just, they got too many packets. If there's 30 slots and they get 50 packets, 20 guys are burned. And it's not like, oh, gee, you can't go. That just means send it back in again. Some people had to do it a handful of times. I don't even know where I am on the map right now. been babbling for an hour. Hold on a second here. Tourist info. Richland. Turn off for Richland and Irvin. You know, I was saying about this job is brainless. This is what I'm talking about. I'm driving on autopilot right now. I don't even know where I am. I just know the GPS says turn in 29 miles. Huh. Okay, I had somebody in here from England. Anybody else from around the world? I've had Berlin, New Zealand. I think we're coming into a town here in the next few minutes. Call the police. Why would I want to call the police? This somewhat lack of traffic is kind of nice. 22. I took on gas here a while, 230 miles ago, and the problem is, are we heading to Buc-ee's? Hey, I like Buc-ee's. That's a Texas thing. That's where I'm out of. Now, I'm just going to keep going here for a while. They do this, the fuel ethanol mixture. You know, some places put 10%, some places put 15%. I took on a fuel here earlier. The problem with ethanol is it's not as efficient as gas, pure gas, and it hurts your gas mileage, and it's hurting my gas mileage right now. I'm at 20.1 miles per gallon because I'm running stupid ethanol in this thing. But once I get that out, I get like 22, 23. So that's kind of frustrating. But gas prices are going down. A little bit here, a little bit there, which is nice. Yeah, Buc-ee's came out of Texas and has spread across the country. I actually bought my wife a shirt at Buc-ee's. It said, "Okay, Karen," on it. It's one of her favorite shirts. Ooh, 194,000 miles. Ooh, it's a lot of drive. I bought this van with 109, which means I put 85,000 miles on it since March. Doing what you're seeing right here. Buc-ee's. Have you ever been to a Buc-ee's? Out of curiosity? We had a guy in flight school that was a National Guard pilot. He was for a unit out of California. And when a National Guard sends one of their pilots, they basically send them a bill, and the National Guard's budget has to write a check to the Army to train their pilot. And they pay the whole thing up front. So this guy was out of Northern California, and he was 36 years old. So, of course, we called him Grandpa because we're all, 20-ish. And halfway through flight school, his unit disbanded. So when he got done, he was a rated pilot. There's a local guy that will give you the written exam to get your actual physical pilot's license. And he went home with his pilot's license, which he now got for free. And because his unit disbanded, because of a distance to the closest unit around there or something, he was no longer obligated to be in the military. So he just basically got a free pilot's license and got paid to go to flight school. And you know about the hoops, the qualifications and the hoops you have to jump through to get to flight school and fight and kick and claw your way into it. Out here in the regular world, a civilian flight school, you need two things. You have to do two things. You have to get a Class 2 flight physical. You have to walk through the front door and say, I want to fly a helicopter. That's it. They'll take anybody. If you can get a flight physical and pay for it, they'll let anybody in. So when I was flying out in the Gulf when I was younger, and there's all these street trained pilots, about half were trained in the civil world and half were military, and the civilian trained guys would always complain about the military pilots because as far as they were concerned, our flight training experience was exactly the same, except they had to pay for theirs in their mind. And it was just unfair that they, were going out and goofing off and drinking beer and doing whatever they want to and going and flying when they wanted to. They weren't in a military environment. And as you go through flight school, you're a student pilot, and then you become a rated pilot. and then maybe later on you become an instructor pilot. And I was looking at the engine out, your engine failure, you have the auto rotation. I don't know if they practice those in Chinooks, but they get you over the airport, they roll the throttle off, you flat pitch it. It's kind of exciting the first time you do it, and then you fall out of the sky and you flare and you land. And I was looking at a flight school out of San Antonio. It was like a brochure. I don't even know how I had it in my hand, but I'm flipping through the brochure, and it said, to graduate the instructor pilot course, the candidate has to do an actual touchdown auto rotation. And I said, what do you mean by that? And the guy says, oh yeah, when you do an auto rotation, you do a power recovery. And I go, what's a power recovery? He goes, oh yeah, you auto rotate down, before you land, you roll the throttle back on, then you bring it to a hover. So what's the point of even doing that? Why would you even, all of us, they don't want to wear the aircraft out. So to graduate as an instructor pilot at a civilian school, you have to do, quote, an actual touchdown auto rotation. I'm thinking, I was a student pilot. I did about 150. But you got to do one to be an instructor, which tells me prior to being an instructor, nobody does touchdown auto rotations. Which, when the day comes you need to do that, you might want to know how to do that when your engine quits, because guess what? It's going to happen. I had an engine failure, and I rode one into the Gulf, into the water. Blew the pontoons and did an engine outlanding in the water. Probably my most entertaining emergency I ever had was in Patterson, Louisiana, in a Long Ranger. And I don't know if you've ever messed with the controls, but you pull power. And I came in to land, and there was the linkage, it's mechanical in a Long Ranger. The linkage was bound up, and I couldn't reduce power. I couldn't drop the power. So I'm stuck at cruise, and if you shut the engine off or lose the engine pulling power, that rotor blade's going to go whoop whoop, and then all of a sudden you're not flying anymore. And there's no emergency procedure for this other than pushing really hard on the collective, and it wouldn't move. So I called on the radio, called ahead, and I said, hey, I got my collective stuck at cruise torque. And the head shit from the company I was flying for, they went into full panic mode, because there is no emergency procedure for a stuck collective. And I told them where I was going, and the Patterson Airport, and I had my regulars on board, guys I fly every day, and I'm coming in, and I said, here's what's going on, and here's what we're going to do about it, so don't freak out, but it's going to get interesting. And I got into Patterson, I got up on the radio, and I called there's not a tower there, it's just the FBO, the gas station. I said, hey, if you guys got a fire truck, grab it and clear the runway, because I'm going to need the whole runway. And they're like, yeah, okay, cool. So they got their little ancient fire truck out, and of course an audience of people who worked there came out to watch. And I got down low, and we came across this big plowed field, and I did some violent turns, some cobra turns, as I like to call them. See, right there, gas is 252. I did violent S-turns, which bleeds off your airspeed. You turn and pull, and you look over your shoulder in case you're being chased. And did a bunch of violent turns, and I slowed the aircraft down quite a bit, and then I pushed it over and nosed down, and I dove down, and I put the front skids on the runway, right on the very leading edge of the runway, and shut the engine off. And I had it going about 90 knots when I did that, and the front skids touched. I cut the throttle, the engine rolled down, and the back of the aircraft bounced onto the runway, and then I chopped the throttle, turned the fuel off, and turned the battery off. So there's no fuel going anywhere, there's no battery electrical charge going anywhere. And then I blew the floats, which caused drag, and everybody opened their doors and held their doors open. So we're doing 100 miles an hour down the runway in an aircraft that I have no control over at this point, other than opening the doors and using the wind resistance to slow it down. And we slid the length of the runway, and this is on skids, and it ended up going off the end of the runway into the dirt and stopped. And a couple seconds later, a big old cloud of dust came by and got in the cockpit. I had my headset on, and the radio crackled, and it was the head shed calling. They said, okay, we're coming up with a plan. I said, yeah, I'm on the ground, and I shut the radio. I had the radio back to listen, shut it back off, and I said, yeah, we're on the ground. And it ground the skids up, and it landed, and they said, how did you figure? I said, what are your options here? Well, just turn into an airplane. That's good old days. All right. I've been on here for an hour and 19 minutes. I'm going to hop off because I got to get off and get something to drink here pretty quick. But I may come on later. I like having people come on here and talk. It's kind of fun, help me pass some time. But take care. I'll catch up with you guys later.